Even with Derek Carr potentially not taking the field for the New Orleans Saints in 2025, I'm not convinced that Shedeur Sanders will be the pick at number 9 overall. We got all that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, New Orleans Saints are doing a lot of homework at cornerback and no one seems to be talking about it. We'll do a this or that. Would you take the quarterback at 9 or the playmaker? And we're going to lead everything off with why I still don't buy, even with the Derek Carr situation, we'll call it, that Shedeur Sanders would be the pick at number 9 overall. We got all that and much more for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, for being here with us this time. Making this your first listen and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Even though Derek Carr might not take the field for the New Orleans Saints in 2025, whether it's because he gets surgery on his AC joint sprain or the shoulder injury, or he ends up off the roster in a post-June 1 cut or off the roster in a post-June 1 trade, I still don't think Shedeur Sanders will be the pick at number 9 overall for the New Orleans Saints. Now, let me clarify my position on this very, very clearly. I would take Shedeur Sanders at number 9. To me, Shedeur Sanders is the best quarterback in this draft class. However, that doesn't mean that the New Orleans Saints feel the same way, and it certainly doesn't feel like the NFL feels the same way. So why is it that I'm not convinced that the New Orleans Saints will go shopping for a quarterback at number 9? And I say that specifically for a reason. Not only do I not think that Shedeur Sanders would be the pick at number 9, I don't know if a quarterback's going to be a pick at number 9. Now, it certainly could be, right? I'm more open to the idea of a quarterback at 9 for New Orleans and Shedeur Sanders at number 9 for New Orleans. I'll explain why I'm not super keen on the idea of Shedeur Sanders to New Orleans, or not that I'm not keen on it, but why I don't expect them to take him at number 9, even though I would. Let me start there, and then I'll tell you why I feel a little bit differently when it comes to quarterback as a whole. When it comes to Shedeur Sanders, too much noise. Simply put, too much noise. You talk to Kellen Moore, he's very good at giving only the information that he wants to give. You talk to Mickey Loomis, only gives the information that he wants to give. How all of a sudden does everyone just know that Shedeur Sanders is the pick at number 9? All the way down from mock drafts that are out there from the national side of it all, to people that are looking at this draft from different angles, to Deion Sanders openly teasing on national television during the Colorado Pro Day that Shedeur Sanders to the Saints has some smoke with the I like these colors, and Louis Riddick over on the other side, winky, wink, wink. To me, that's a little much. The draft is all about having a poker face. The draft is all about keeping secrets. And I don't understand what the value would be of a Deion Sanders going out there and telling the whole world what the cards they're holding are. That doesn't make any sense. The only reason why you do that is because you're trying to entice some team to come and trade up to get ahead of the New Orleans Saints in order to make sure that your son, and this is just a good dad move, I applaud Deion Sanders for it, doesn't slide in the NFL draft. Now pair that with the Carolina Panthers, whose general manager did a pre-draft press conference not so long ago and mentioned that no one's calling about the number 8 overall selection, although he's open for it. And one of the reasons why he's willing to trade off the number 8 overall selection is because there would be a belief that the New Orleans Saints would take a quarterback at number 9 that some other team wants, and that team wants to jump up ahead of the New Orleans Saints to grab that quarterback so that they get their guy and the Saints don't get to steal him away, and yet no one's calling. Everyone's talking about how tough it's going to be to trade out of the top 10. That's never the case when multiple quarterbacks are set to go within the top 10. I think one of two things happens when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. The New York Giants panic into drafting him, which they should, at number 3 overall, or you end up in a situation in which Shedeur Sanders simply falls. Falls. He shows up for the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 21, or maybe the Las Vegas Raiders surprise and take him at 6, especially if the Jaguars surprise. Instead of taking Mason Graham, they take Ashton Jinty at 5. Let's say that that's the way that this all works out. Then all of a sudden, maybe the Raiders are in play to take him at 6. Like, there's just as much, in my opinion, a chance that Shedeur Sanders falls beyond 9 as there is that he's not even on the board at 9. I can see either of those things happening. You're watching the New York Giants right now, panic. They're going through. My good friend Tyler Rowland and I talked about this on today's episode of Locked On NFL. They all of a sudden started bringing in a bunch of these young guys. Come for a visit, which like screams the owner walking in and looking at the draft board and going, wait, the quarterback's not at the top? And Joe Shane, the general manager's job is on the line. Brian Daboll, the head coach, his job is on the line. And you're not going with the rookie that could extend your lifespan? Interesting. Owner walks out, and then everybody goes, crap, we got to get those guys here. And so then they panic brought all these other quarterbacks in late in the draft. And so I still think there's a chance that Shedeur Sanders isn't even on the board at 9. He shouldn't be on the board at 9, if you ask me. And if he's on the board at 9, he should be the pick, but I'm not convinced that the New Orleans Saints are going to do it. I'm more intrigued by the quarterbacks that you rarely hear about than the quarterbacks that you keep hearing about when it comes to this draft class. Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milroe. It's those guys that are most intriguing to me, even more than Jaxson Dart, only because they're the ones that we're not hearing as much about. Now, I'm not closing the book entirely on quarterback at 9. The fact of the matter is that once guys like Cam Ward, once guys like Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Ashton Jinty, and maybe Mason Graham are off the board, the grades, as far as we understand it, are pretty similar for players after that from like 5 to 40. So because of that, if the New Orleans Saints love Jaxson Dart, I could see him taken at 9. I don't see them going that route. I'd be surprised if they went that route. But if they love a quarterback that would otherwise go within the top 40 and they took that quarterback at 9, whoever that quarterback is, it makes sense. It's one of the reasons why I think even if people think of Shedeur Sanders as a second-round quarterback, it makes sense to take him at 9 just to make sure you're the one that gets him. So if there is a quarterback that the New Orleans Saints love, not like, but love, it makes sense to take them at 9. So the opening up of the idea of the Saints taking a quarterback at 9 feels more likely than specifically Shedeur Sanders because of the amount of noise that's not present elsewhere, and the general truth of the NFL draft, which is A, everyone lies, and B, everyone's quiet, all at the same time. So we'll see which way things go. Would I love it if the Saints took Shedeur Sanders? Absolutely. If they took him at 9, I would absolutely love the selection. Do I think they're going to do it? No. I think they go towards a playmaker instead that helps them out on either side of the football, which is going to increase their flexibility and their ability to potentially address other positions in next year's draft. Let's break that down next. This or that. Would you rather the quarterback, or would you rather some of these really important scenarios that the New Orleans Saints have to consider? We'll break that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Upwork. Look, when you're trying to scale your business, it requires the right expertise at the right time. And with Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in a ton of different areas that can help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives you the flexibility that you need by connecting you to top freelance talent from across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, marketing, and more. Whether you need extra hands for a project or you're looking for a long-term partner, Upwork can get you where you need to go. And they do so with fast and easy hiring processes. They make sure that you're able to post your job, and when you do it, it's free and it's simple. And you're always looking at the opportunity for cost-effective growth as well, because instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps you find those affordable, top-tier freelancers as well. So visit Upwork.com today so that you can post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. All right, family, picking between prospects in the NFL draft is more than just comparing a prospect at one position to a different prospect at the same position. In fact, it's different from comparing one player at one position to another prospect at a different position because you have a roster at home, right? You got McDonald's at home. And so there are things that you have to figure out when you're a team that's selecting in these drafts that are more than just prospect versus prospect. It's why a lot of teams just go with their board, right? And so going with the board sometimes will get you to a player that you feel is a top tier or upper tier player that doesn't necessarily address a position that others outside your facility might look at as a position of need. For instance, the New Orleans Saints might have Arizona wide receiver Shedeur McMillan ranked higher than Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders, in which case, if they go by their board, you're drafting McMillan, you're not taking Sanders, even though quarterback might be seen as the bigger need, right? And so what I wanted to do today was focus on some draft scenarios. We kind of talked about this in the Saints Squad show Thursday morning, myself, Dylan Sanders, contributor over at Saints Wire, Athlon, sports publisher John Hendricks, and former New Orleans Saints wide receiver Lance Moore. We were breaking down and kind of talking about this. Well, we weren't breaking down. We were fine. But we were breaking down the idea of comparing a selection to what a different selection might mean for you, not just selection versus selection. So here's what I mean by that. Would you rather Shedeur Sanders at 9, or would you rather Shedeur McMillan and Spencer Rattler, right? You're not just looking at the other player that you can get, you're comparing to all of that, how that player and the quarterback that you have would have an impact. And for a lot of people, I think they would feel pretty good going into 2025 with Spencer Rattler if you also had Shedeur McMillan. Similar situation. Would you rather Shedeur Sanders and this current crop of pass catchers, or would you rather Spencer Rattler with Tyler Warren, the big-bodied tight end, solid enough route runner, kind of gets pushed off a little bit in press, but typically finds a way to rebound, athletic, yards after catch guy when he gets the ball in his hands, can run good routes, can play inline, out wide, and in the slot, would be a major playmaker for your offense. And one of those playmakers that other teams have to focus on, much like Shedeur McMillan, a pretty good type of player to give a young quarterback like a Spencer Rattler. Now, you could also say, well, what if they try to trade up for a quarterback after taking a player at 9? Great. But you still probably would rather take that top tier playmaker at 9 and then trade up for the quarterback as opposed to take the quarterback and then try to trade up for a lesser playmaker at the end of the first round. For instance, let's say that the New Orleans Saints want to focus on their defense early, right? Mason Graham is still on the board at 9. That's going to be pretty tough to pass up on if the Michigan defensive tackle is there. Big time playmaker, helps you out with your pass rush, but also can help change your run game. Takes up a lot of double teams, took up a lot of double teams in college. Could be something that he does here in the NFL, which helps you change those numbers along with the Devon Godshaw, along with the Brian Brzee, so on and so forth. Okay, you get this big playmaker on your defensive interior that helps you improve your defense. Then you trade up later on for a quarterback. If you were to take that quarterback at 9, you're not going to find that big defensive playmaker down at the bottom of the draft, right? Because we're talking about Mason Graham as one of those top 4 players that we were discussing earlier. And so these are the things that I think we have to kind of consider in terms of draft scenarios as opposed to just prospect versus prospect, right? There's a bit of this or that to it. We did that in a previous episode. Would you rather Shedeur McMillan at 9 or Jaden Higgins at 40? Jaden Higgins at 40 would be an absolute steal. No doubt about that. But the other piece that we're looking at here is, what about folding that in with the team and the players that you have? And that's where things could get really interesting, right? Let's say Jaden Higgins does make it to 40. Are you better off with Shedeur Sanders and Jaden Higgins, or are you better off with Shedeur McMillan and Spencer Rattler? Ooh, that feels a little bit closer, doesn't it? Right? So these draft scenarios change the way that you look at all of these different things. So it's just an interesting sort of way to look at where things could go for the New Orleans Saints and how things need to be kind of bandied about when it comes to making some of these draft decisions. The other thing that we have to acknowledge here, and I know people don't, I know that there are a lot of Saints fans that don't want this, but I do need to acknowledge it. Like we've done these last couple of shows on the idea that Derek Carr wants out of New Orleans. We have to acknowledge that that might not be the case too, right? Like I think at this point, the evidence is stacking way too much for it to not be the case. We're getting to the point where it's just like, hey, it's here in front of you. Either you're looking at it or you're not, right? But we should acknowledge that, as I said in previous episodes, like this is with the understanding that Derek Carr is going to be on his way out. But if there is truly a situation in which Derek Carr is managing this shoulder injury, is seeking options, could get surgery, which might end his season, or goes through a rehabilitation program that gets him back out on the field within the first 4 weeks. How does that change your draft plan? I think that it doesn't, if I'm being completely honest. I think you're still probably looking at a quarterback at some point in this draft. I think that you're probably not taking one at 9. I think that you're probably still looking to build your roster with these 9 selections. The Saints are in such a good position in a draft class that is so strong in the middle of its draft class. They have 6 selections in the first 4 rounds. It's a very, very good situation for them. If I'm the New Orleans Saints, I'm using all 6 of those selections in those 4 rounds. I might even consider, dare I say it, trading back at one point. Doesn't have to be at 9, it could be at 40. Doesn't have to be at 40, it could be at 71. Doesn't have to be at 71, it could be at 93. I might even trade back just to get more of those picks in that range, just so that I can potentially hit on some more players in that area. And the reason why I want to do that is because if you can maximize what you're getting in this year's draft, it helps to elevate your flexibility in terms of what you can do in next year's draft. Let's say the New Orleans Saints don't take a quarterback at all in this year's draft class. I'm not saying that it will happen, but we have to acknowledge that it can happen. Years ago, oh, they love Kenny Pickett. They love Malik Willis. Oh, Matt Corral, watch, he's sneaky. Oh, Desmond Ridder could be a good fit, blah, blah, blah. They took none of them. They didn't take a single quarterback. And one of the reasons why I think that could be the case here again in this year's draft class is because the noise is the same this year as it was last year, except there's not a player's dad furthering a narrative that's one of the biggest, most successful personalities in our time, right? Very, very different in that situation. However, if the Saints spend their 9 selections in this year's draft and top 6 selections in this year's draft, building their roster, solving the big need with the big-bodied wide receiver, bolstering their defensive line, getting players that fit Brandon Staley's defense, addressing the run game, helping themselves on the offensive line. If they can do all of those things, I named 5 things. We're talking about 6 picks. If they can do all those things, and then they go into 2025 with Spencer Rattler, they go into 2025 with whomever at quarterback, and they succeed, it doesn't leave them out of the quarterback conversation in 2026 if that class ends up being as good as we think it might be. Why? Because you have filled so much of your roster out and helped yourself so much with the young talent in 2025 that when you roll into 2026, you've got additional flexibility where you might be able to move on from that extra second round pick and that future second round pick or that future first round pick in order to be able to go up and get a surefire thing at quarterback. It's not a bad situation to be in to roll into 2025 by investing heavily in your entire roster here in this year's draft. It's not a bad situation to be in. So not only could the New Orleans Saints take Shedeur Sanders at 9, not only could they take Jaxson Dart at 9 or take a quarterback at 40 or trade up into the first round, they could take a quarterback late. They could not take a quarterback and they would still be in a good position to be able to address the position at a later time in 2026 if they need to, and would still be able to go into 2025 ready to learn valuable information about the future of their team. I just think they should do it with a young quarterback. Whether it's one already on the roster or one that they add, I don't think they should be doing it with a veteran that's not a part of their future. Coming up next, whole bunch of noise around the New Orleans Saints quarterback search, but they've been doing a lot of homework on corners as well. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Did you know that your Amazon Fire TV is also an Xbox? You can turn your TV into an entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. All that you need with no console required is a paired controller. Grab your Amazon Fire TV Stick, throw that in there, grab your paired controller, and then launch your Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included. And then you can play a bunch of different excellent titles, including EA Sports College Football 25, Call of Duty Black Ops, and Avowed, all as easily as you find all your favorite shows. It makes it great for traveling as well. You don't have to lug a console with you. All you need is your controller and your Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. It's awesome. Head over to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controllers are required. Available only on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd gen. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of conversation around the quarterbacks that the New Orleans Saints have been visiting with when it comes to the NFL draft. But I'll be honest, cornerback is one of the places that have been incredibly interesting for New Orleans as well. They've been already linked to 6 different cornerbacks in this year's NFL draft class. And that's just the ones that we know about based on top 30 visits and private workouts. These corners and this cornerback class is absolutely under a lot of scrutiny by the New Orleans Saints. And when I say scrutiny, I don't mean like being critical. I mean that they're scrutinizing, they're studying, they're learning these guys. They're doing a lot of homework on this cornerback class, and it makes perfect sense. Because remember, the New Orleans Saints could still add a starting corner in this year's class without going at number 9 overall. They could do it in the 2nd round, they could do it in the 3rd round, they might be able to do it in the 4th round, depending upon which corner they feel like best fits their system. They could even do it at pick 184 in the 6th round if the right guy falls far enough in what is a pretty talented cornerback class. Why are the New Orleans Saints so interested in corners? Well, they lost their 2 starting corners since the, since the trade deadline of last year. They traded away Marshawn Lattimore to the Washington Commanders. Since then, they also lost starting cornerback Paulson Adebo in free agency to the New York Giants. And so the Saints did sign Isaac Yiadom. They went after Travarius Ward. I'm actually kind of glad that worked out the way that it did. And I think, could Isaac Yiadom start on the outside for you? Sure. He performed really well with this team back in 2022 and 2023 when called into action. I think Kool-Aid McKinstry becomes one of your top 2 corners on the outside. Easy, already is, basically, because after the Marshawn Lattimore trade and after the Paulson Adebo injury. And then, ideally, Alontae Taylor is able to stay in the slot. Now, we discussed days ago trading for Jalen Ramsey, how you can make that work. You have the cap space. You can fit him under the salary cap. You'd have to restructure him and all that kind of stuff. It would just be all about like what the asking price is from a trade compensation or draft pick compensation perspective would be. But we also know that the New Orleans Saints don't typically make moves like that, right? And this is an opportunity for them to continue to build through the draft. So let's take a look at the 6 corners. Here are rather the 6 cornerbacks that the New Orleans Saints have visited with so far. When it comes to top 30 visits, it's been 2. Louisville's Quincy Riley, speedy, good physical nature, all those good things. Siobhan Ravel, East Carolina, again, incredibly physical, very, very good corner. Was in conversation as the top corner in this year's NFL draft, but then suffered that injury last year that limited his season. The expectation, however, is that injury is not of long-term concern and that he'll be okay going into 2025's training camp and all that other stuff. Got his opportunity to do some additional things, but those top 30 visits give you a chance to check out the medicals, as well as run the drills and do some workouts, meet with the coaches, see the facility, all that other stuff. You get the medicals. And so if the medical's clear, Siobhan Ravel at 40 makes a lot of sense for New Orleans because he is the type of player that the Saints would be looking for in Brandon Staley's defensive system. Smart, really physical, all those other things. Another smart, very physical player that they had a private workout with was Ole Miss cornerback Trey Amos, who to me feels like he feels like Paulson Adebo, right? Kind of feels like the same corner. Really physical, great at the ball in terms of being able to make plays on the ball, not just getting there, but being able to make plays when he's there. All those other pieces. I like his build as well, as more than 6 foot, more than 200 pounds. He's a physical guy at the line of scrimmage. Reads well, has good speed. I mean, there's a lot to like about Trey Amos. And if Siobhan Ravel has some concerns in his medicals, then Trey Amos is an easy selection for you to take as somebody that's proven some durability, and has the ability to be able to make plays on the football, all those other things as we just mentioned. Corey Black is the most recent one coming out of Oklahoma State. Really interesting player. Really interesting player. 6 foot, 190-ish pounds. Plays very physical as well. But the thing that I really like about him is that when it came to his coverage, played a lot of man coverage, over 48% last year. A lot of times that's a little bit of a leap that players have to make going from college to the pros when they're not playing like SEC football. They're playing a lot of zone, and all of a sudden they got to turn to play man. And here's the other thing that I liked a lot about the way that Oklahoma State deployed Corey Black is that he was on the primary receiver, opposing team's number 1 option, almost every snap he played. He was constantly on the number 1 guy. And so I think that's one of those other things that gives you some confidence about your ability to be able to translate up to the next level because of what you might be able to do because of that experience, right? Knowing that you can match up with and take away the number one guy in an opposing offense, that you played a lot of man coverage, that you played sort of this physical style of football. I like that a lot. The other two guys, Zoff Frazier and Jacob Parrish, are seen as maybe later round selections. I think Corey Black kind of falls in the 4th, 5th round area, while Trey Amos, Quincy Riley, and Siobhan Rivell all kind of fall into that day 2 area. Meanwhile, Jacob Parrish could fall in the day 2 area as well. I like him a lot coming out of Kansas State. Same thing that we're talking about. Like, all these guys kind of fit the similar physical prototypes. They're big, they have good reach, like good length, and they're physical. Zoff Frazier coming out of University of Texas San Antonio, great plays on the football, excellent read and react ability, just played at a much lower level than guys that are coming out of Ole Miss and Oklahoma State and Kansas State, for instance, Louisville as well. So Siobhan Rivell coming out of East Carolina, as well as Zoff Frazier coming out of University of Texas San Antonio, are guys that are maybe not seen, that are seen as having to take a leap. But I will say this, Zoff Frazier coming out of University of Texas San Antonio is also coming from the same school that Tariq Woolen came from, who had a phenomenal rookie season with the Seattle Seahawks 3 years ago and has continued to be a starter for them and a potential star for them as well. And this is a guy that's gotten that same level of coaching. So you know that his style is able to translate, that what he did at UTSA is able to translate to the next level. So I have a little concern around Zoff Frazier being able to translate as well, especially with his size, especially with his physicality, and especially with his speed and ability to make plays on the football. So all these guys kind of check those similar boxes. So what I mean to express with that is that the Saints don't look to be in the market for a slot corner. They don't look to be in the market for a depth corner. They look to be in a market for a starting corner that can go and make plays and get the ball back to the offense. And each and every one of those 6 players has some quality that puts them in that prototype, that archetype, however it is that you want to look at it. So really, really interesting, the amount of work that the Saints are doing at corner. This is an organization that loves drafting defensive backs in the 2nd round, loves drafting defensive backs in day 2. Absolutely something to watch at 40, depending on what the New Orleans Saints do at number 9. Because, of course, Michigan's Will Johnson still very much a part of this conversation, but without the 40 time, with the rumors that he was running a 4.5 in training, and with the injury history, especially here as of late, turf toe and hamstring, of all injuries to bring to New Orleans, turf toe, hamstring, not the ones that sit most well with this organization, or that have played very nicely with this organization, let's say. I could certainly see this team being a little bit skittish around that. Before we wrap up here today, I want to acknowledge the retirement of Ryan Ramczyk. We all knew that this was coming. The New Orleans Saints, from a financial standpoint, probably will wait to process the retirement paperwork until after June 1st, physically, and that will allow them to defer $10 million into next year, as opposed to a new $10 million accelerating into this year. So expect that to be a second announcement in June, that all of a sudden that the announcement is processed. But one of the Saints' best offensive linemen of their history, protecting one of the best quarterbacks across from one of the other best offensive linemen in team history, who also just recently announced his retirement, in Teron Armstead, has finally announced his retirement. And we shout out to Ryan Ramczyk, who gave everything that he had to this team, playing through that degenerative knee issue from the moment that he was drafted to the moment that he to the last moment that he was on the field, gave everything he had to this team. And I just think that's so admirable and so awesome. So congrats to Ryan. I hope you get to enjoy retirement a ton, buddy. And sounds like we get to see him announce the picks on Friday for the New Orleans Saints 2nd and 3rd rounds of the draft. So that'll be super cool as well. Or maybe it's just the 2nd round. I can't remember how they do it, but he'll be the Friday announcer for those selections. All right, y'all, coming up in tomorrow's episode, I'm going to tell you why, if there's any quarterback I would roll the dice on in this year's draft, it's Jalen Milroe. And I know that's an unpopular opinion, but I'll explain my ways in tomorrow's show. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jaxson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.